What I'm trying to do is raise awareness about sex offender treatment and to help people understand that 2/3 of all sex offenders are highly treatable right in the community. And of those 2/3 who successfully complete treatment, 80% never reoffend again. And that's an important statistic to know. And I believe that if more people really understood the value of treatment and the success rate, there would be less hesitancy to reach out and get the help that they want or they need. Well, let's just compare it to drugs and alcohol, for example. If you look at the recidivism rate in drugs and alcohol, we're looking at probably 12% to 15% do not use drugs and alcohol again. The rest do. In fact, the motto of drug and alcohol treatment, and maybe I shouldn't say motto, one of the statements that they make is that relapse is the nature of the disease. I don't say that to anyone who walks in on sex offender treatment. We don't have the luxury of relapse. So what tends to happen, of course, is drugs and alcohol are far more acceptable in our society. So it's more acceptable to reoffend. But when you look at the recidivism data, you've got a much higher group of people that never offend again. 80% of the 2/3 do not offend again. That's a lot of people compared to a success rate of only 12 to 15% in drug and alcohol treatment. What we look at and what we have studied is that top 1/3%, and many of those people are psychopathic, sadistic offenders who are well known in our culture. They make the headlines and don't have any hesitancy about telling you, if you let me out, I'll do it again. At this point in time, there really isn't any cure, magic, or interventions for that population that has any success rate to speak of. So they are best contained in the prison system. They are not necessarily getting better, but society is protected. So in talking about the 20% that go through treatment and do reoffend, something happened, obviously, that prevented them from fully taking in the information. It could be that they have some sort of personality disorder. It could be certain triggers and factors went on. We don't really know. We don't really know. Again, in my 21 years of doing this, I've only had one guy who reoffended. And the truth is, when he left treatment, because his time ran out, I knew he was going to reoffend. I knew he hadn't gotten it. But of the guys so far that I have known got it at a deep dish level, none of them have reoffended to my knowledge. What happened correctly? For the 80% who don't reoffend is easy to answer. At some point, I am giving out information, demands, this is what you've got to do differently, they're highly resistant, they don't like me a lot, it's just not working. Something begins to shift. They begin to listen, not necessarily to me, but to some of the guys who have gone further down the path of treatment. And as a result, they begin to, many times without even their knowledge, they begin to buy in to what is being said. And I have a theory that most people want to feel good about themselves. It's not pleasant to feel like you're unworthy or undeserving. And as most people begin to go through treatment and we scrape off the barnacles of all the ego defenses and the trauma in their lives and the negativity, they begin to like themselves a little better. And as that process happens, they begin to buy into treatment even more, to the point where they adapt it as a way of life. And that is what works with the ones that go through treatment and never reoffend. They've changed their life, their attitudes, their belief systems, and their desires. Quite a big order, but it works. I'm going to look at what a sex offender looks like when he walks in my door. And then I'm going to give you sort of a verbal picture of what he looks like when he walks out my door. So when he first comes in, and I say he in this case because I do not treat women. I want to be clear that there are women sex offenders, and we're beginning to understand more and more about that. But because I treat men, I will use the word he a lot. When an offender first comes into treatment, first of all, he isn't there for my Southern charm. He's there because he has no choice. It's either treatment or prison or jail or the work center or something unpleasant. So he comes into treatment and I say, "Why are you here?" And the pat answer is, "Because my PO told me I had to come." And over time, we start with the belief that an outside influence has intervened and picked them up and placed them, against their will, in sex offender treatment. And that's where we start. And little by little, I begin to chip away at the belief system. I also have the police report and the victim statement. So I use those to say, this is what your victim said, what do you say? And of course, the resistance is phenomenal. There's usually anger and a lot of resistance. And that goes on for a long period of time. Breaking denial is probably the hardest work I do. And I say it's rather like chipping away at Mount Rushmore with a teaspoon. After we get through the denial phase, they begin to look around them, see other people who've come farther down the path than they have, and begin to make some bonds and begin to look to each other for information and guidance. And over time, as they settle into treatment, and we do a lot of just clear work on their beliefs that allowed them to offend, their thinking errors which gave them permission to offend, all of those things that came together. As we begin to chip away at all of that, over time, what's left is the real person without all their protective armor. So there comes a time when they have gone through all the assignments, they've been in treatment for 1.5 years, 2 years, and they have to read what is called clarification letters to their victims. This is sort of the last step before they go into aftercare. And this is the litmus test for me. I know immediately by listening to those clarification letters if the person got it. Now, what a clarification letter is, not an apology letter. It is the individual taking full responsibility for what they did, how it affected the victim, how they assume it hurt the victim, the very nice things they used about the victim to offend them, and then a complete understanding of what the individual, the perpetrator, is doing to change his life. So as we get to that, any thinking errors clearly would show up. Any false beliefs would clearly show up. If none of those exist, and usually there are a lot of tears at that point, what I know is they've internalized the behavior. They're not parroting what I'm saying anymore or any other group members are saying, but they've got it. It's theirs now. It's internalized. So to summarize, they come in with everything being an outside force. Everything. And they are pretty much the innocent victim of that outside force. When they leave, they're saying, this is what I did. This is how I hurt others. And this is what I need to do for myself and for everyone else to make sure I never offend again. So it's a clear black and white contrast. We have an expression about being cured. And I think it's true. I don't care what kind of addict, alcoholic, gambling, fill in the blank. Nobody gets cured unless you're a ham or a turkey. And the reason you don't get cured is because this has become part of your long-term memory. And you can't erase long-term memory. And if you did, you wouldn't do anything but sit there and kind of blubber. So long-term memory is very important. And no, nobody gets cured of anything. Overeating, too much booze, none of those things. But they do learn how to put stops and interventions in to prevent it from happening again. The not hurting anyone becomes the priority. That becomes the focus. And what we say is no more victims.